AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy this morning is former ABC 7 political reporter Charles Thomas.
Hello there.
And Charles, we discussed in some detail with Professors Richard Epstein and Randy Barnett yesterday the Supreme Court cases, specifically the presidential immunity case. But we've also, over the last couple of days, had a deep dive on the Chevron decision as well as the Sarbanes-Oxley 1512 J6 case. Some momentous decisions in the closing days of the term. And the reactions from the left to this presidential immunity case, because, of course, their myopia got the best of them. They're just focused on Trump. They have no consideration for precedent setting in their pursuit of Trump, including with respect to presidential power and the ability of the executive to exercise his or her Article 2 powers. Instead, we get hysterics. Rachel Maddow providing a good example of what I'm talking about.
Donald Trump and his counsel asked for this 100% absolute immunity thing, which was insane. I would say they got 105% of what they were asking for. They got immunity from this court, despite some of the language in Justice Roberts' ruling saying that there was some measure of humility here, some measure of restraint. The practical impact of what they have done is to give Trump immunity that even he and his counsel did not ask for. And given that the hypotheticals over the course of these arguments, as you rightly pointed out, included things like, can the president assassinate a rival? I think we have to look at the Supreme Court's affirmative answer to that. Yes, you can. With as much seriousness as it deserves. I mean, this is a death squad ruling. This is a ruling that says that as long as you can construe it as an official or quasi-official act, you can do absolutely anything, and never be held accountable, not only while you are president, but forever.
Yeah, I think we have to give those comments the seriousness they deserve, too.
Incredible. It's as though these people don't understand. They have no respect for the country or its future. And it's mind-boggling to think that they've abandoned all reason because they hate Donald Trump so much.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Professor Jonathan Turley. Of course, you know him, columnist, television analyst, Shapiro Chair for Public Interest Law, George Washington University Law School. He's got a new book, The Indispensable Right, Free Speech in an Age of Rage. Professor Jonathan Turley, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. I'm a native son of Chicago, so it's always good to hear Chicago voices.
That's right. You are. Did you go to high school here?
I did. I went to Quigley North and then Latin.
There you go.
And I also went to Northwestern and U Chicago.
All right. Very good. I also went to Northwestern for undergrad, but I'm ashamed that I did, so I don't talk about it very much. So with respect to Rachel Maddow, is she got her finger on the pulse of it? We're going to have an endless reign of Pinochets now because of that Supreme Court ruling?
No, it's really still chilling to see how the opinion has been distorted. In The Indispensable Right, I have a long chapter on media and how it has participated in this anti-free speech movement, but also how the media has just sawed at the branch upon which they are sitting. And this is an example of it, that people are looking elsewhere for media. You have media outlets who are failing. The Washington Post has lost $77 million and half of its readership. And this is why no one reading the opinion would come to that conclusion. And that's the reason it was also, I wrote a column yesterday, chilling to see an address from the White House by President Biden making the same misrepresentation, saying that there was now no limits on presidential power. That is absolutely untrue. The court adopted the middle option here. It rejected the extreme arguments on both sides, and everything that Maddow said is just clearly contradicted by the opinion itself.
And now the Trump appeal of the Manhattan conviction on the basis of this decision. I mean, we spoke about it with, as I mentioned, Epstein and Barnett yesterday, and I mean, it seems pretty clear that those are private acts that would not be covered as by this opinion. So why does it take Merchan the better part of 2 months to offer to do the sentencing hearing as he takes up this argument that Trump's legal team is making? This seems to me like it could be dispatched pretty quickly, and you can move to the sentencing hearing pretty quickly. Do you sense anything awry with pushing it off past Labor Day?
Well, I'm surprised by the late date. As the Merchan hearing really proves the lie, because this is an example where presidential conduct is unlikely to be treated as protected. It's going to be treated as private conduct. The court laid out 3 different sort of baskets in which you could place presidential statements or conduct. One is the core constitutional conduct that's absolutely protected. And by the way, the opposing counsel from the Supreme Court accepted that. There would be some clearly absolutely protected areas. The second group are official functions that are being challenged, that are on the periphery, and those have merely a presumption of immunity that can be rebutted. And then the third basket is private conduct, which has no protection. That's very different from what you heard from the president and what you heard from Maddow.
And Sotomayor's dissent, which was, basically like 5 degrees cooler than what you heard from Rachel Maddow and others. It called to mind, that's been recirculating, a letter that was written by none other than Larry Tribe of Harvard University to one President Obama, urging him to not nominate Sotomayor. If you were to appoint someone like Sotomayor, he wrote, whose personal history and demographic appeal you don't need me to underscore, I'm concerned the impact within the court would be negative in these respects. Bluntly put, she's not nearly as smart as she seems to think she is, and her reputation for being something of a bully could well make her liberal impulses backfire and simply add to the firepower of the Roberts, Alito, Scalia, Thomas wing of the court. That seems almost prescient at this point.
Yeah, I was really disappointed with the dissent by Sotomayor. It was hyperbolic and it lacked substance as opposed to soundbite. But unfortunately, the dissent really didn't take the lead from the majority and work through the implications not only of the majority's view but their view. Keep in mind that President Biden, when he was denouncing this opinion, seemed to forget that when he was vice president, he and President Obama vaporized a U.S. citizen without a trial, without a charge. Now, could they be charged, therefore, with murder by a Republican district attorney? That's what the majority was trying to address, to create some breathing room without giving away the store.
Now, your book, The Indispensable Right, Free Speech in the Age of Rage, we have to get your view on Amy Coney Barrett's majority opinion in Murphy. That was a surprise to me and I think many others, and a great disappointment, but particularly her reasoning.
Well, it was a disappointment in both the internet cases. There was a bit of a punt by the court, and it's not uncommon for the court to take exit ramps. But the concern that many of us have is that this will be viewed as a green light for those that are pushing for greater censorship, including the president. In The Indispensable Right, I go through all of our periods of rage. This is not our first age of rage. And the first victim is always free speech. And the book looks at why we're still struggling with free speech and why this is the most dangerous anti-free speech period in our history. And the reason is that we've never faced this alliance of academia, the media, corporations, and of course the government. That has never aligned in this way, and the result is an unprecedented system of censorship that a federal judge called Orwellian, and he was right. And this president is, in my view, the most, and I make this point in the book, is the most anti-free speech president since John Adams. I mean, President Biden has been relentless in pushing for censorship, even saying that companies that didn't censor opposing views were, quote, killing people.
Right. I mean, the use of misinformation to be illiberal, as a sort of your facade to be illiberal. And some of the statements just in recent days, we were discussing the statement from former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution was engaged in election interference for writing an editorial that Joe Biden should step aside, like the New York Times did, like the Chicago Tribune did. So now an editorial that opposes the prevailing view of the left is election interference. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution editorial board are ostensibly insurrectionists.
Right, and that, of course, is the new nomenclature on the left. And one of the things that I say in The Indispensable Right is many of these arguments for silencing others are not new. Some of the same terms were used at the beginning of the Republic, things like fake news and this type of disinformation. All of those were rationales used for censorship. There's nothing new about these claims. It's just that they're suggesting that somehow we've never faced these issues. But I think that the point of Indispensable Right is to try to – this is a book 30 years in the making, and I didn't want to finish it until I could suggest a path forward to restore free speech in the United States, but also to try to understand why it is we're still struggling with this right. We all agree it's indispensable, as Justice Brandeis said, but not why. And the reason, I think, is that there is a type of original sin in the American Republic. When the First Amendment was written, many of the framers believed that free speech was a natural right. It didn't come from the government. That as human beings, we're hardwired for free speech. We need it to be complete. And that view really led to the revolutionary language of the First Amendment. And it's still revolutionary. There are law professors, including a colleague of mine, who are leading a movement to amend the First Amendment. She says that the First Amendment is excessively individualistic. She's been lionized by the media. They've praised this effort to amend the First Amendment. There are books out there who are saying that the First Amendment is harmful, that we have to move beyond free speech. That's the crisis of faith that the book talks about. And if we're going to get to this new awakening of citizens to understand what's at risk here, we're going to have to reemphasize what was the original purpose of the First Amendment, that this is a natural right. It's not there just because it's useful. It is essential for being human.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to watch, too. We talk about the possibility of boomeranging and the short-sightedness of so many of these political gambits by the left. It's the same thing. I mean, the members of the Fourth Estate who want to curtail the First Amendment, and they don't have any idea that if the power structure changes at the federal or particular state level, that this could someday boomerang back on them. They could find themselves on the wrong side of the gulag's bars.
Well, that is, most of these periods show that same short-sightedness. And what's interesting is that the villains of this history often at the end of their lives express regret. John Adams, after using the Alien and Sedition Acts, at the end of his life tried to walk back and say, even sort of shift the blame to others. People have this morning after regret as we go through these pendulum swings. And when I go through each of these periods, to tell the story of American free speech through the personalities and periods that shaped it. And we have villains like John Adams. We also have heroes, but the heroes are generally these people that meet what George Bernard Shaw said. But Shaw said that unreasonable people expect the world to conform to them. And he said, therefore, all history is made by unreasonable people. And these are the stories of magnificently unreasonable people, people who just refuse to be silenced. And they are our true heroes, and they're everyone from communists to, socialists to anarchists. They come in every stripe, but they share this DNA that many Americans recognize, that free speech defines us as a people.
Jonathan Turley is a columnist, television analyst, and the Shapiro Chair for Public Interest Law at George Washington University Law School. His new book, The Indispensable Right, Free Speech in an Age of Rage. Professor Turley, thanks so much for joining us. Best of luck with the book.
Thank you for having me.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
When you're in chronic pain, you're miserable to be around, and so are the people who have to watch you suffer.